Think forward. Think Research Channel.
There we are again.
Here we are again.
Oh, how wonderful to be with you again. Well, a grand group of young people.
It is, and we're going to have a good Q&A going here in a minute. Just to let you know how ranking goes. When I came in, they said, there's 2 chairs on the stage. One of them has a bad leg. You'll be sitting in that chair, Judy. Don't lean back. So you got the good chair. I can't lean back. So if I look tense, so you know. At any rate.
You're sure there's no danger of my leaning back?
No, you're okay.
Thank you.
All right. I want to tell everybody in the room a little bit about Walter's background. Even though we know that he's a legend in American journalism, it really is an impressive list of accomplishments and stories he's covered. Let's talk about that. He's covered virtually every news event during his more than 60 years in journalism. The last 50 of those years were with CBS News. As a United Press correspondent, Mr. Cronkite covered World War II, landing with the invading Allied troops in North Africa, covering the Battle of the North Atlantic in 1942, and taking part in the Normandy beachhead assaults in 1944. After reporting the German surrender, Mr. Cronkite established United Press bureaus in Europe, was named United Press bureau chief in Brussels, and covered the Nuremberg trials of Goering, Hess, and other high-level Nazis. In July of 1950, Mr. Cronkite joined CBS News in Washington as a correspondent. He was anchorman for their political convention and election coverage from 1952 to 1980. He assumed his duties on the CBS Evening News on April 16, 1962, which began as a 15-minute broadcast. On September 2, 1963, it debuted as network television's first half-hour weeknight newscast with Mr. Cronkite's headline-making interview with President John F. Kennedy. He was the only journalist to be voted among the top 10 most influential decision-makers in America in surveys conducted by U.S. News & World Report, and he was also named the most influential person in broadcasting. In a nationwide viewer opinion survey conducted more than a decade after leaving the CBS anchor desk, he again was voted most trusted man in television news, which was kind of bad news for everybody who was at that time sitting in an anchor desk. Currently, Mr. Cronkite maintains a demanding international lecture and public appearance schedule. He hosts many public affairs and cultural programs. He co-founded the Cronkite Award Company, which has produced more than 60 award-winning documentary hours for Discovery, PBS, and other networks. And we are thrilled to have you here today.
Oh, shucks.
Oh, shucks. And I will just tell this story again. In 1980, I joined CBS News as a radio correspondent. Excuse me, and I walked into the newsroom in New York, and the radio and TV people back then weren't segregated. You know, they actually liked radio people. But we still had our desks up against one wall, and I had my little typewriter, yes, a typewriter. And Doug Edwards sat on one side, Richard C. Hotlett on the other, and these are big names in broadcasting. But then Walter Cronkite walked through the room, and I just went, oh, you know, oh, I can't believe I'm in the same newsroom as Walter Cronkite. And then, of course, I was thrilled with that, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in the same newsroom as Walter Cronkite. I was terrified that they were going to figure out, you know, I was a total fraud. But that's the effect Walter has on aspiring young reporters. I mean, we so admire his career, and I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask him questions today. This is how we're going to work this. This is entirely Q&A, and he's here to talk to you. And I can attest to a lot of these students are just, well, they're wonderful.
I think your introduction has been so wonderful, I think I'd like to leave.
Okay. Okay. No.
No, I'm anxious to meet these people.
We have microphones on either side of the room. What I'd ask you to do is, if you have a question, and I hope you have them, is to line up at those microphones and keep your questions fairly brief. Do not make speeches or statements, but I don't think we worry about that here. Simple questions, and Walter will answer them for you. And I hope you've come prepared to ask questions. So maybe I'll just throw, anybody? Start lining up. You have to go to the microphones on either side. Oh, this is so good. I'm going to ask you a question while they're getting ready. I've decided I'm segueing out of reporting and coming to teach here. I made a real decision that I think journalism education is so very, very important if we're to save what we cherish. And it's so important to a free democracy and a thriving democracy to have ethical, fair, young journalists out there.
Absolutely.
What would you tell them at a time when network news, actually all news, is really been hit hard by profit, bottom line, competition from all of these internet and all these other stresses? What would you tell them about this job as a place that's still worth coming to, if you think so?
As to what?
As a job that's still worth aspiring to.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. For heaven's sakes, I would be very disappointed if you people don't have what one of our great producers, Fred Friendly, referred to fire in the belly, a real determination to be good journalists, to understand what it takes to gather a story, what it takes to write a story, what it takes to get that story either on the air or in print, and take that role so seriously that what you learn here is going to be a real true basis for your ability to move on into professional journalism, and with understanding that you've got the basic knowledge to take your place in the newsroom from scratch. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to be a cub reporter, as we used to call them. You're still going to be a cub reporter. You're going to be a freshman on the block. But with the education you get here, you're going to move faster into the full swing of the job than you could possibly do without this education that you're going to get here.
Oh, we love that. We'll be packaging that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take this. Who are you? Where are you from? And your question.
You know, I'd like to do something if we could. Could I ask you folks out there to identify when you ask a question what your intentions are in journalism, what you want to do in journalism, that you want to be a broadcaster, that you want to be in print, that you want to work for magazines, whatever your goal is, if you've got one at this point. And I'm not asking you that you have to have one, because you may determine on that goal as you go through the educational portion of your education. But if you feel like it, I'd kind of like to know what you all are thinking of.
Terrific. You go first.
All right. My name is Dave Taylor. I'm a junior broadcast journalism major, and I hope to produce for television one day. My question to you is, how do you feel about how the recent natural disasters of Katrina and Rita were covered by the news media, and if you feel this was a positive turning point for the news media?
I've got to tell you all that I'm a little bit hard of hearing.
Okay, let me repeat.
Wait a minute, that's a damn lie. I'm deaf as a post.
Okay.
And
let me repeat his question for you. I may do this. He's a broadcast journalism major, and he wants to know how you felt about the news coverage of Katrina and Rita, and whether it was a turning point, an upward turning point for broadcast news on the hurricane coverage.
what is the turning point?
No, the hurricane coverage.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the hurricane coverage, what I saw of it, of course there was so much of it on the air and there's so much of it in the newspapers that I don't claim that I read it all or that I saw it all by any means. But what I saw of it in television, I thought was quite well done. I'm always amazed when these hurricane things come up, of the reporters who stand out there in the wind with the palm trees falling around them, with the rain coming down in their faces, and that they're standing there and doing their job, men and women, doing their job in the face of what I would consider imminent danger. Now, they may know more than I know about the secrets of hurricanes. They may know that they've got certain, the place where they're appearing to be in the open may not be quite as open as it really is, but I think they do darn good jobs. Some of it, the coverage, particularly for CNN, for instance, which I thought it did a wonderful job of being on the air longer than anybody else. But they were on the air so long that it seemed to me there was an awful lot of repetition of what was going on in the gathering storm before it actually hit. I think they could have done a little editing on that. But I thought basically that the coverage was good. It, of course, was a terribly difficult story to cover. Some of them were able to dare getting out into the streets of New Orleans, for instance, at a time when everybody else had been warned away. And there they were out there in the flooded areas doing the reportorial job that needed to be done. This is particularly true, as it always is in these stories. The courage is to be mostly admired among the photographers. And we who write can always fake it to a degree. Now, I don't really suggest faking it, but to the degree that we can take a quick look and then get most of the story by talking to survivors and the military and the police and the firemen and so forth. And we interview them in the safety of their positions, and then we can write the story from there. That's not true of the photographers. They can only get the story by being out in front, not only in hurricanes, but this is true particularly in military affairs. The people in the Middle East today, the cameramen get out there in the street where the bombs are flying, and that's where they've got to be. We writers can get the story a little bit later, and after the mere threat of immediate death is over.
Okay, let's go to this side of the room. Yes.
Hi, my name is Micah. I'm a communication major, and I hope to go into print journalism. What I'm interested in knowing is what kind of major changes you have seen in the news, and more specifically, what kind of hopes you have for our generation in terms of anything we can do to improve it or any changes we can make.
What changes have you seen in the news over the years, and what hope do you have that this generation can do anything about it?
What was the question?
What changes have you seen in the news over the years, and what hope for this generation to do something about it? Yes.
The phrasing of your question suggests that you think that it needs some change at the moment. And I'm not criticizing you for that. If you are analyzing what you think should be done and as against what is being done, quite frankly, I'd like to talk to you more detail, because I'd be fascinated on what your generation thinks should be done to improve, since I gather that's what you believe is necessary in our broadcast routine today. Now that I've made that little speech, what was the question again?
How have you seen it change over the years?
Oh, how have I seen it change? Yes. Well, of course, I've seen an incredible change, because I've been there on in television journalism since practically the beginning of television journalism. You folks, I'm sure at your age, look back and think that's a long time ago. Anybody my age realizes it wasn't that far long ago at all. Television, actually, you know, is really only as old as about what would I say, probably 1945, 48, something like that. Now you would think that's a long time ago. Some of us know that it was in our childhood. So I watched television from the beginning and became a part of it very early on in the beginning. I think maybe the television was 4 years old when I had my first television job. So it's changed immensely since that time. When we first started with television journalism, we had no pictures, for instance. If you can believe that, we got on the air and told the story without pictures. Then the photographers caught up with the business, and we developed rapid development of film, and we were using film at the time in the process, and we had we developed quick development of the film, so that we could shoot the film during the afternoon and get it on the evening news, if it were in town. But then we had to ship that film. If it was outside of New York City, for instance, we had to ship that film to New York. So we were flying it in. We were delayed that much in getting it on the air. With European stories, it had to cross the Atlantic by air before we were able to get it on the air. So we weren't up to the story as quickly in film as we were able to tell what the story was doing. So we had to come back to the story a day later or 2 days later to show you what really happened, which we couldn't show you when we told the story originally. That was not the best way, obviously, to do a television news program. We eventually got to the point where we had the satellite transmissions, so the film got to us almost instantly. And as it did, we began to be able to cover the stories around the world on the same day that they developed. And we really got into what you see today as modern television coverage. So it's changed quite a bit. That really is the essence of the change that has taken place.
Okay, thank you. Yes, over here.
Hi, I'm Heather. Oh, that's loud. I'm Heather. I'm a communication major. I was a journalism major, but I actually changed out of it because of the emotional toll that it is on journalists. My question to you is, how are you able to cover such, horrific stories and devastation such as what's going on in New Orleans and still go on with your day, still be able to have your chin up? What advice would you give to journalists on how to cover such stories?
What was the story that shocked her?
Katrina, she's just wondering how a journalist deals with difficult, tragic stories and manages to keep going. Walter Cronkite announced the death of John F. Kennedy on the air. And you had a moment when JFK died that was quite emotional. It was probably the first time we'd seen somebody tear up in the anchor chair. So, you know, I think she's looking at, how do you deal with the emotional stories?
Well, you over a period of your professional life, you will grow hardened, I'm afraid, to tragedy, to a degree. But then occasionally the story comes along that really stops you. And if you're on live and have no opportunity to kind of get a grip on yourself, you might have the kind of episode I had when I had to report that John F. Kennedy had died. We were on there for a couple of hours after the shooting took place, before, although we got rumors out of the hospital that he probably would not survive. It wasn't until the official announcement that John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, had died. And when it happened, I teared up. I didn't blubber. I didn't lose my equilibrium entirely. I talked through it, but I choked a bit. And it was just there that the real horror of the situation overcame me. It wasn't just that I thought Kennedy was a pretty good guy, and I knew him, and I liked him a lot. But it wasn't that. It was the tragedy that had happened to America and the world, that here was a leader who we had some reason to hope was going to do some rather important things, particularly civil rights. He initiated the effort, the determination that we would have civil rights that would give our black populations full voting rights on all of the civil rights that we whites had. This was a possibility that I saw disappearing. I'm not saying that I analyzed it so completely before I teared up, but it just overwhelmed me that we had lost a leader that many of us thought was going to make a great difference in not only our country but the world. And of course, part of it was losing somebody who I knew, who I considered a friend. That was part of the story. But you simply have to grab hold of yourself. And over the years, you learn that the job requires staying with it. You know, there's an interesting thing I can tell at this point, I think, that you might find it interesting. You know, the police and the firemen in larger cities in the United States today, they have discovered they need after a major tragedy, losing people in a fire, for instance, or a terrible accident or something, we have found they need psychological help. That sometimes days, weeks after having to, in the case of the firemen carrying out the dead, or in the case of doctors in the emergency room, they have a delayed reaction to what they have seen, and they need psychological help. Well, we have found that perhaps we need that in journalism. At least we did in that case of Kennedy's death. Several of our reporters really had a reaction to having to cover the death of Kennedy, including me. It wasn't serious enough that we needed psychological help, but I could understand for the first time this delayed reaction that you can have to a serious story.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Joshua Sharp, and I'm a communications major, but I'm also looking at broadcast journalism. And I wanted to ask about what the difference is between a small town anchor who doesn't rise up very far and somebody who goes to the ultimate pinnacle of success with journalism. What's the difference that propels that success? What makes a journalist successful?
Okay, that's a better question. Thank you very much. What ingredients have to be there for a journalist to rise from being a small town anchor or reporter to a network? Well, it used to be considered the pinnacle.
What is it?
A network reporter or anchor. What does it take to get that kind of success from down here to up there?
You mean moving up?
Moving up.
Well, it takes impressing not only your people in your small town or smaller town at any rate, but getting an opportunity perhaps first of all, there is an awful lot of movement up in station personnel. You're looking for another job in a slightly bigger market. And if you're doing a good job where you are in a small market, the next larger market will have vacancies occasionally because they're moving up. And so you move up the ladder, station by station, until eventually you get into a market, well, let me finish that first. You get into a market where actually you're just a step below network, a big market, Chicago market, New York market, that kind of thing. There is another situation that can prevail, and that's that you're lucky enough to, in your local market, to have a story break in your local market that the networks would come to you to do a piece or two pieces for them before they get their own correspondence into place. In that case, you get that exposure that you can't hope for unless you're lucky enough to be present for a tragedy or a story that requires some coverage on the scene before the network gets there. But basically, it is moving up step by step, larger market, larger market, larger market, until you get into the market where there is network exposure occasionally.
Not everybody moves up. What qualities are in a reporter who is successful? What qualities would you look for in a reporter?
Well, first of all, there is the need to be able to write well. Now, you're not going to always get the chance to write your copy. You might very well have that lucky break where the story breaks in your backyard that you're ad-libbing. That is a great exposure too. But as a general thing, moving to the next market, it is writing. It is how well you present yourself, how good you are. Writing is very, very important. I'm dumbfounded at occasional journalism students who I talk to who apparently don't think there's nothing to learn. Most of them who do that are people who really don't want to be journalists. They want to be on the air. They want to be stars. And I can pick them out in a large audience, a large classroom audience like this, because I will see that they're all dressed up. They've got a lot of makeup. They've got their hair is all done, and that's just the men. But they will ask maybe a I don't want to say a dumb question because I don't want to scare any of you off, but they will ask a question, and I can pick them in the audience, in the group, and I just see this beautiful girl over here and that handsome man over here, and they're all dressed up and they've got their hair all done, and what they're looking for is for me to say, oh boy, there's one we ought to hire for CBS. And they don't have any real gut feeling about journalism. They want to be actors and actresses, and they don't belong in journalism. They belong in the theater wing of the university.
I'd just like to say that we occasionally take very good-looking people and make them into writers here. So, all the time it happens.
Yeah,
Okay.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay, over here.
Hi, I'm Katie Kogarin. I'm a sophomore. I'm hoping to double major in broadcast journalism and international relations. My question for you is, do you believe today that the press, both broadcast and print in the United States, does a fair job in balancing coverage between national and international interests or issues?
Is there enough international news?
No, I don't think they do quite an adequate job in most newspapers and broadcast units. And that's partly because of the judgment that most newsrooms have, and indeed is almost fundamental to journalism. And that's that the closer the story is to your viewing audience or your print audience, your print readers, the closer that story is to you, actually geographically, as well as an interest area, but geographically, the more important that story really is to your readers or listeners, watchers. That is just fundamental to journalism. As the story gets more distant, as it finally gets off in foreign lands, since you're interested in doing international journalism, that's part of the story. I mean, part of your problem. As it gets off in distant lands, you begin to challenge the knowledge of your audience, even as to where the country is. They don't know how to pronounce it, for one thing. It's a little tiny country somewhere that we've had no interest in before, and now suddenly in the world we're living in, the atomic age, we got to be concerned about that little bonfire of a country where that bonfire could turn into suddenly a mushroom-shaped cloud in our modern society and modern politics. So we've got to pay attention to all of those things. But the difficulty is always, in answering your question most directly, that the distance away from the audience, the less they're likely to be interested in the story. And we've got to try to make it interesting when it's an international story that could seriously affect us. And that's part of the challenge we have, is to understand the story well enough and write it well enough and present it well enough on television. That includes our photographers out there as well, to interest them in a story that is really quite a long way from immediately impacting your audience in the United States.
Did you want some more?
Thank you.
Okay, just back to this side.
Good evening, sir. My name is Alex Michelson. I'm a broadcast journalism and political science double major, and I hope to be a reporter and hopefully an anchor one day. First of all, it's a great honor to talk to you. Secondly, my question is, as ratings pressure has increased over the years, it seems like political reporting has decreased. How do you get people to care about politics, especially on a state and local level, and make that an issue on the TV news as compared to so many of the things that don't necessarily seem so important?
I understood that one. Of course, you've got your finger on a very serious problem, What has happened with the standard broadcast unit that is the networks, the kind of major local stations, is that cable has come in with such enormous coverage, enormous number of programs on at any given time, that they have cut seriously into the viewing audience for both network and local television. In doing so, of course, they cut the lure for the advertiser. The advertiser is less likely to be spending the money they used to spend in network or local television. They have put some of their money into cable, popular cable programs, or they just don't spend it in broadcast. And that hurts. That hurts a lot. The owners are, of course, interested in the profit. This is not except in the case of national nonprofit television, but the rest of the stations and networks are very much interested in the profit. I'm afraid that in most cases, profit is their dominant interest. There are very few broadcast executives and owners who think first of their product. They think first of the profit that they're going to get out of it. I say very few because there are some, and we all should applaud them and try to give them a boost whenever we can. But there is this fact of life. So the quality of broadcasting has slipped in network and local television. I can only say that I hope that we're realizing this now, and I think that I know I've been encouraged today to know what's happening here at this very good journalism school that you have here, and the program that I was here for today, which awarding stations for what they do in political reporting. With that, we're inspiring, I hope, a lot more attention to political reporting. And I have a feeling, maybe it's just because I've been on campus here today, that things may be getting better. It may be only here that they're getting better. I hope that's not the case. But I do think that probably we're beginning to recognize the need for more attention to our political reporting. We've got a situation in this country that is terribly dangerous to us, I think, and that's that we are not properly educated. We've got a situation where teachers, who we turn over our children to when they're 5 years old or so, and leave them in their hands to be educated enough to take their place in a democracy and to vote properly, in other words, to understand the issues. Those teachers are paid so poorly that we are not getting the best teachers in our schools. They're paid today in most schools less than their janitors make. That's criminal. It's criminal. And this ought to be the first attention, it seems to me, of our government, our local governments and our national government. We ought to be paying our teachers a heck of a lot more than they are now getting paid, so that we have the best teachers, not those who can afford to work for a penance. And that's awfully important. You know, Thomas Jefferson once said, "The nation that expects to be ignorant and free expects what never can be." Well, we've got a nation that expects to be ignorant and free. And we're not going to succeed that way. Our republic is in danger if we're not smart enough to vote properly, to understand the issues. I'm not saying which party you have to vote for properly, but I'll whisper it to you if you want to know. But anyway, both parties ought to be concentrating on that particular issue right now. And right now is a bad time because we're so poor, thanks to our tax policy and our promises right now that what we're going to do with these poor people who have had their lives disrupted by Mother Nature. We're a poor nation. We don't have the money we need to do just the necessary things to make our republic strong. So there's a lot to worry about.
Okay.
And a lot to report.
We only have time for 2 more questions, so Felix, you're next, and then you, and I'm sorry for, maybe you can catch him later, maybe. Okay. Felix?
Welcome to USA, Mr. Cronkite. My name is Felix Rodriguez-Lima. I'm a senior double major in broadcast journalism and history. And my aspirations are to become a broadcast reporter. My question to you is, it was about this time last year when the whole situation with the Bush Air National Guard documents came out and was reported by CBS News. And I'm wondering what your take was on that whole situation and what kind of ethical issues that brings up to the future journalists that are in this room.
Are you talking about their mishandling of the prisoners?
No, the CBS memo gate. Walter, when Dan Rather went on and talked about the National Guard.
You mean that particular story?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the way CBS handled it, or mishandled it.
Well, that was a personal failure on the part of Dan. Not the entire story was his fault. He had one of our top producers, a very good woman producer, who was convinced of the sources that she had for that story. And Dan accepted it as it would be natural for him to do so because it was a darn good story. But then he made the mistake of when it turned out there was some doubt about the authenticity of the sources. He did not immediately say, we have a problem with this story. We're looking into it and we're going to report back to you just as soon as we have an answer. Instead of for 4 days defending the story and carrying on with it, that was the fatal mistake. The country wouldn't have paid much attention to it if it had been dropped immediately, and then they would have had to come back to it to say we made a mistake, but that would come later and it'd be forgotten. There was a mistake made, in other words, in handling the story.
Good question.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Angie, and I'm a freshman, and I want to be a broadcast journalist or a lawyer. I don't know. It's still up for debate. But I was wondering, like, at your stage of being an anchor, when you were still an anchor on TV, how much actual reporting, like yourself, do you still get to do?
You mean when he was an anchor?
When you were an anchor, how much actual reporting did you still get to do? Like when you were a high-up anchor?
When you were in the anchor chair, did you still get out and get to do reporting?
That's a very good question. The amount of reporting you can do, for one thing, there is some reporting you can do right in the anchor desk. An awful lot of stories can be covered today by telephone. That is, you've got the sources, you get the right sources, and can get through to them on the telephone, have established perhaps your association with the office involved or the group involved, and they will accept your phone call. You can do an awful lot of reporting. Now that is part of the skill of being a reporter, is the contacts you make. You must make as many contacts as you possibly can, and it's very hard to do that from the anchor desk, although you may get entree to people from the anchor desk because of your prominence. You don't have the time to really develop those sources. What you want to do if you're a reporter is get as many resources as you can so that you can always get through to them. They're friends of yours. When a story breaks that affects their area, you've got some sources to work with. Now, I think I've gotten off the beat. What was the question again?
How much reporting do you yourself actually get to do when you're an anchor?
Right.
Yeah.
So what you get to do from the anchor desk is really how important the story is, and the attitude of your bosses and the company you work with as to whether they believe in the anchor man getting out, or woman getting out to the story from time to time.
Walter famously got out and went to Vietnam to do some reporting in Vietnam, and he came back, and which this is something that would probably never happen today, but he basically reported that from what he had observed, he didn't see how the U.S. could win in Vietnam, to which the White House said, "We've lost Cronkite, that's it."
Yeah.
And that much clout.
Quite a bit of that depends. That travel business of getting out of the desk, getting out of the office, it depends on the ambition and the interest of the anchor person, him or herself. There are some of them who are perfectly satisfied just to sit there and take the copy written by others and be a transmitter of other people's reporting and copy. There are other of the anchor people who want to be deeply involved, who do write much of their copy, who get involved in the assignment of stories to be done. That was my case. When I got the job, when I was told that I had been nominated to be the anchor person of CBS Evening News, my first demand was that I would have to be the editor of the news. And as a matter of fact, I insisted on a title. I wanted people to know that I was running the news department, that is Evening News, that program. I took the title of managing editor, and I lived up to it. I participated in the assignment of stories. I edited copy. I wrote much of the copy. I went out on stories, and that is my picture of what an anchor person ought to be. Naturally, I would feel that way since that's the kind of anchor person I was. But it seems to me that kind of involvement should be, and I think the better of the anchor people today follow that same basic performance record.
Before we close, I want to follow up on that with one question, which is one thing you did that was quite amazing from the anchor desk was to somehow bring about the beginning of the peace process with Anwar Sadat when he was the president of Egypt. And maybe you could describe that, because it's history now, but it was what actually brought about peace between Egypt and Israel, which seemed impossible, and which you did from the anchor's desk.
Well, it's a somewhat wrong story. Do you mind if I take a little time with it?
It's an amazing moment in history.
If any of you got other classes, well, we'll excuse you. The story was that I got the first interview with Sadat after he became the president of Egypt. And the title, I forget what the title was at the moment. He was the head man anyway. And I got the first interview with him, and I flew over, and I'd flown overnight, so I was very tired. But we did the interview under the spreading banyan tree of his home on the Suez, and I must say that he droned on about what he expected to do in running the country. And most of it was pretty dull for Americans, for anybody else except maybe an Egyptian who had absolutely nothing else to do that day. And he droned on, and the flies were around our heads, and I was never had such a hard time keeping awake in doing an interview. It was just so dull. And I suddenly heard him say, I thought I heard him say, and I shall go to Israel. And suddenly I'm awake. I said, what did you say? You're going to Israel? He said, yes, 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 Walter. I'm already Walter to him. Yes, 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 Walter. I am going to Jerusalem. And I said, when are you going? And he said, just as soon as there is peace. I said, oh, suddenly the story isn't as good as it sounded. But then I said, what would it take to go to Israel before peace, to get peace? And he said, well, I said, will you go and meet Begin, who was the head of Israel at the time, Begin? And he said, yes, 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 I would go to see Begin. Now I had a story. So I said, when would you go? He said, I'd go tomorrow. Well, immediately my producer, this was by telephone. Oh, no, I was there then. Of course, that was another story. I was there. And as soon as I could get back to my hotel room, I called the office and I said, get hold of Begin, for God's sake. And we got hold of Begin, and I told Begin that he had said this. And Begin said, well, tell him to come, tell him to come. And I said, well, he said he could come this week. He said, oh, no, he can't come this week. I've got to go, I'm going to London to see Macmillan, who was the Prime Minister of England at the time, and he said, I cannot. And then he interrupted himself. No. If he'll come this week, tell him to come, tell him to come. And I said, I think, Mr. Prime Minister, that he needs something more than my telling him to come. I think you ought to invite him. Tell him he's invited, tell him he's invited. I said, no, you tell him he's invited. And he said, we'll tell him he's invited, we tell him he's invited. At any rate, it worked out that he went to Israel. Indeed, that very week, a little later, and the meeting took place, and it was the first time that an Egyptian or any of the Arab countries had met with the Prime Minister of Israel, and it made quite a difference. Of course, now there is no reason that they shouldn't meet. The ice has been broken,